have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
The Anglo-American establishment. It is becoming impossible to ignore the giant elephant in the room. Despite fervent mass media efforts to discredit the truth for the last 100 years, the internet has now allowed millions, if not billions, to learn about the hidden rulers of the world, their nefarious past, and even more sinister intent. Today, 6 multinational corporations own 95% of the mass media. The elite control 95% of what we see. What gets on the news, content in TV, movies, magazines, video games, all influencing us as to what to buy, how to live, what we like, what we don't like, what to think. Conditioning ideological messages abound in this social control mechanism using propaganda. Any attempts to threaten the dreamlike illusion most people believe to be reality is met with fierce opposition. Conspiracy theory resounds as the most mind-numbing response. We all must remember that Richard Nixon adopted that pitch, conspiracy theorists, during Watergate. Big conspiracy there, no theory. One simply has to realize the resistance to investigating claims of a conspiracy theory exposes the theory as an actual true conspiracy. This is not rocket science, yet cognitive dissonance abounds. With the media's constant bantering to discredit the truth, you can see why most dismiss it. After all, these are effective tools of influence. Also, most folks are too damn busy trying to keep their heads above water, making credit card payments, car payments, house payments, and other payments, to worry about why they have to struggle so much. And if you are the type that complain, the stock answer from bosses to spouses to friends and family is, because that's just the way it is. If further investigation leads you to a few books like Tragedy and Hope and The Anglo-American Establishment, or you begin an investigation into the Federal Reserve or the Council on Foreign Relations, the tax-exempt foundations, or government documents, congressional records, and other suppressed information, you will find the truth. And yes, you too will soon be labeled a conspiracy nut, especially if you share your findings with the public. But in fact, books like Tragedy and Hope, 1966, and The Anglo-American Establishment, 1981, both by Carol Quigley, or The Naked Communist, 1970, by Cleon Skousen, The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, 1994, Mullins on the Federal Reserve, 1952, Secrets of the Federal Reserve, 1983, which is like sort of a revamping of Mullins on the Federal Reserve, both by Eustace Mullins, and many other similar past treatments on these subjects, truly prove and amplify the near fruition of this very real agenda. Even with the oligarch-controlled mass media, monopoly on news and pop cultural influence, and COINTELPRO disinformation, the global elite's plans are being thwarted by an ever-growing alert and active populace. This is thanks most in part to social media and widespread availability of this truthful evidence on the internet. People are waking up. More and more are learning the truth that has been hidden from them in plain sight. Overwhelming evidence is available to find if only you simply take the time to look. By reading the right books and investigating the right organizations, documents, and records, many are discovering the truth. A critical mass is approaching. Recent attempts to criminalize conspiracy theories and free speech should amplify this. Tyranny abounds. The Constitution is being trampled on. Once that balance shifts and the awakened mobilize politically, the jig is up. That is why I fear the elite are conjuring up another horrifying false flag event like they did on 9/11. But this time, it will directly affect the entire world. On September 14, 1994, speaking at a UN business conference, David Rockefeller said, "We are on the verge of a global transformation." Interesting. We're on the verge of transforming America. Isn't that what Obama said? All we need is the right major crisis, and the world will accept the New World Order. Indeed, 9/11 was the catalyst, the inciting incident, setting in motion the agenda that has unfolded in recent history. Much of it having to do with controlling oil resources and interests and establishing Rothschild-owned central banks. In 2000, there were 7 countries without a Rothschild-owned central bank. They were Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, Libya, Cuba, North Korea, and Iran. In 2007, General Wesley Clark, retired, reported that shortly after the terror attacks of 9/11/01, he was informed of the government's agenda to conquer 7 countries in 5 years: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. Interestingly, today the only countries left without a Rothschild bank are Cuba, North Korea, and Iran. Well, what do you know? No wonder Obama is getting so cushy-cushy with the communist Cubans and softening on Iran. Our recent history illuminates roots that were sown long ago. In Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time, written by Georgetown University professor Carroll Quigley in 1966, exposes the realities of this age-old and ongoing agenda. Covering the years 1880 to 1963, Tragedy and Hope focuses on the economic problems designed by the global elite. Quigley, who was the mentor of Rhodes Scholar and former President and Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton, had unfettered access to documents from the Council on Foreign Relations for more than 2 years, proudly revealing the fact that secret societies have played a significant role in world history. In fact, he very much agreed with it and wondered why so much trouble was made to keep the world government agenda a secret. I know of the operation of this network because I have studied it for nearly 20 years and was permitted for 2 years in the early 1960s to examine its papers and secret records. I have no aversion to it or to most of its aims and have for much of my life been close to it and to many of its instruments. I have objected both in the past and recently to a few of its policies, but in general, my chief difference of opinion is that it wishes to remain unknown, and I believe its role in history is significant enough to be known. Tragedy and Hope, pages 949 through 950. In his book, The Anglo-American Establishment, From Rhodes to Cleveland, Quigley traces the history of a secret society founded in 1891 by Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner to foster the British Empire's power and influence over the world. Quigley wrote, "The organization was so modified and so expanded by Milner after the eclipse of Steed in 1899, and especially after the death of Rhodes in 1902, that it took on quite a different organization and character, although it continued to pursue the same goals. The society consisted of an inner circle, the Society of the Elect, and an outer circle, the Association of Helpers, also known as the Milner Kindergarten, the Times Group, the All Souls Group, the Cliveden Set, and the Round Table Group. The society does not have an actual name, but all affiliations are of the same group and working for the same goal, a new world order." Quigley notes that the leaders of this group were Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner from 1891 until Rhodes' death in 1902, and Milner led the group until his own death in 1925. Subsequent leaders, Lionel Curtis from 1925 to 1955, Baron Robert H. Brand from 1955 to 1963, and Adam D. Morris from 1963 until the time Quigley wrote Tragedy and Hope in 1966. This secretive and influential alliance continues to this day under the cover of darkness. The agenda moves forward via secret meetings, first known as the Omega Group, but since 1954 it has been called the Bilderberg Group. Only until recently, within the last 30 years, has the shadowy Bilderberg Group been exposed to the light of criticism. Before the 1980s, any investigation into the group, its members and intentions were met by dead silence from the mainstream media. For more than 30 years, the Bilderberg's existence was fully denied and shot down as a wild conspiracy theory. Indeed, the Bilderbergers and the Milner Group have been secretly working behind the scenes and using their enormous wealth and clout to control the political systems of every country in the world. This organization also functions through certain loosely affiliated front groups, including the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which is known as Chatham House today, and the Institute of Pacific Relations and the Council on Foreign Relations, as quoted in Tragedy and Hope on pages 132, 950 through 952. Quigley states that he was in direct contact with the International Anglo-American Network. To achieve their aim of world financial domination, the organization cooperates with any group on either side of the political spectrum. Fascists, communists, anarchists, even today's radical Islamists. Norman Dodd further exposed this reality shortly before his death in an interview with G. Edward Griffin. In the 1982 interview, Norman Dodd reveals the ongoing plot to control education via funding from the great tax-exempt foundations. He also speaks of a 1953 meeting he had with Rowan Gaither, then president of the Ford Foundation, who candidly stated the Ford Foundation and others wished to comfortably merge the United States with the Soviet Union. Wouldn't you know, the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations continue to fund communist and socialist causes. Of course they do. They're collectivists. The full 1982 interview with Norman Dodd can be found on my website, howardnema.com, on this posting along with the full text of this broadcast. There is hope for the Anglo-American tragedy. During the Cold War, David Rockefeller had unfettered access to regularly flying in and out of Moscow on banking business. When he landed at the airport, he was met like a rock star with much pomp and circumstance. The Russian people loved him. In addition, other secret societies are briefly discussed in Tragedy and Hope, including a consortium of the leaders of the central banks of several countries, who formed the Bank of International Settlements, BIS. Initially, the Bank of International Settlements was established on May 17, 1930, by Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States, to supposedly facilitate reparations imposed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. A charter for the bank was drafted at the International Bankers Conference, and its charter was adopted on January 20th, 1930. The Bank of International Settlements is based in Switzerland and has immunity in all the contracting states. And we wonder why the warmongering economic hitmen and nation killers are never prosecuted for crimes against humanity. To seal our fate of being consumed by the death throes of economic slavery and war for all eternity, according to the charter, shares in the bank could be held by individuals and non-governmental entities. This, of course, was quite convenient for the Rothschild, Rockefeller, and Royals, among the other Illuminati bloodline families, who are among the top shareholders. They are the rulers. At least they want to be. Quigley reveals quite openly that the Milner Group wielded considerable influence over British and American foreign policy in the first half of the 20th century. This influence continues to this day, albeit the relationship and goals are obscured from the public and tightly hidden from view. As a totalitarian one-world government is incrementally established, any evidence of this truth is shot down by the controlled mainstream media as conspiracy theories, to shelter the truth, even as history proves this alliance to be quite real and factual. Seek truth. Watch and share Truth Talk News, where news the mainstream media ignores is the top story. Subscribe to Truth Talk News Live and Freedom First Films on YouTube. Go to howardnema.com for links to more truth. Until next time, I'm Howard Nema. Thank you for watching Truth Talk News.
We'll tell you any shit you want to hear. We do it in illusions, man. None of it is true. But you people sit there day after day, night after night, all ages, colors, creeds. We're all you know. You're beginning to believe the illusions we're spinning here. You're beginning to think that the tube is reality and that your own lives are unreal. You do whatever the tube tells you. You dress like the tube. You eat like the tube. You raise your children like the tube. You even think like the tube. This is mass madness, you maniacs. In God's name, you people are the real thing. We are the illusion.
Their nefarious past and even more sinister intent. Today's 6 multinational corporations own 95% of the mass media. The elite control 95% of what we see. What gets on the news, content in TV, movies, magazines, video games, all influencing us as to what to buy, how to live, what we like, what we don't like, what to think. Conditioning ideological messages abound in this social control mechanism using propaganda. Any attempts to threaten the dreamlike illusion most people believe to be reality is met with fierce opposition.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
The Anglo-American establishment. It is becoming impossible to ignore the giant elephant in the room. Despite fervent mass media efforts to discredit the truth for the last 100 years, the internet has now allowed millions, if not billions, to learn about the hidden rulers of the world. Opposition. Conspiracy theory resounds as the most mind-numbing response. We all must remember that Richard Nixon adopted that pitch, conspiracy theorists, during Watergate. Big conspiracy there, no theory. One simply has to realize the resistance to investigating